Greetings, Otaku Faithful. Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm here to bring you yet again another Boardwalk Empire episode review right here on Otaku Assemble! Weekly. As always, I'm here to bring you the latest in this week's Boardwalk Empire episode review. To be honest, though, I almost forgot that I had to do a review. I was watching the series premiere of Hell on Wheels, the new AMC original series. To a buddy of mine called me up, and then we got into this nice little football discussion. Which, for the record, big shout out to my man Willis McGahee, running back for the Denver Broncos. Did his thing this week for my fantasy. Appreciate that, bruh. Best of luck on you with your hand injury recovery. Anywho, but let's jump into the review, Boardwalk Empire episode review. Don't want to make this video too long. So this is season 2, episode 7, entitled Peg of Old. Now, I'm going to do this review a tad bit differently. There are 4 characters in particular that I want to focus more on in this week's review. And all of the other supporting characters, I will discuss them stemming off of the 4 main characters. So I mean, it's kind of like the fashion I've done the reviews in the past, but this is going to help me get around to all of the things that I want to talk about from this week's episode a little bit easier. So bear with me with that. So, okay, so 4 main characters I want to talk about, and the first is going to be good old Nelson Van Alden. Kind of weird that I would start a review off with him. But let's talk about what happened with Nelson. Okay, so in last week's episode, we saw that that Nelson and Lucy, they were still carrying on with their arrangement as they had previously agreed. However, Lucy changed things up when she gave birth to their little girl in last week's episode. And then, of course, the shit really hit the fan when Nelson's wife, Rose, came back into Atlantic City and found out about the illegitimate child. So in this week's episode, we pretty much pick up where that left off. And from what I can tell, it seems like Rose has just cut Nelson off. She's not returning any phone calls. She's not returning any letters. Nothing. Haven't heard from her throughout this entire episode. So that's number 1. But number 2, a funny little thing happens between Nelson and Lucy, because apparently the arrangement was, like, we knew what, okay, the arrangement between Nelson and Lucy, we knew what the obligations were for Lucy, but we didn't really know what the obligations for Nelson were exactly. We didn't know specifically what they were until this week's episode. Apparently, Nelson had promised Lucy $3,000. That was the agreement, that she would, you know, stay at home, have the kid, keep it all under wraps, not tell a soul, and in exchange, he would give her $3,000. In essence, that's the price for the child she was bearing, because his plan was, once she had the kid, he would give it to Rose, and they would raise that kid up, you know. However, Nelson wasn't able to come through on his side of things. And so Lucy, she reached out to, of all people, Nucky. And Nucky found this to be a rather convenient circumstance. And this is going to kind of segue into the next character, the next main character I want to talk about, which is Nucky. Because, okay, what happens is that Lucy, she reaches out to Nucky. She tells him everything. Nucky reaches out to Nelson, and he pretty much makes him an offer. Hey, I can provide you financial relief for your situation, and in return, you will become a spy for me in the office. Because we found out in this week's episode that apparently the new attorney, the new prosecutor for Nucky's case, you know, that we found out would be coming to Atlantic City in last week's episode, she arrived in a very, how do I say this? She made a strong impression. I liked what I saw. I hope she sticks around. I hope she sticks around. Anywho, But yeah, we got, I'm trying to remember her name. It was, it's on the tip of my tongue. I cannot remember her name. But anywho, so yeah, the new assistant attorney who's supposed to be the new prosecutor on Nucky's case, she's pretty much, she's putting a lock on everything. She's making sure that this thing goes without flying, goes through with flying colors, and she's pretty much making sure, she's making it a much bigger deal than just election rigging. Like, she wants to get Nucky on every fucking thing. So what did Nucky want from Nelson? In exchange for financial support, Nelson would be a spy in the office to let Nucky know everything that this chick is planning. What does Nelson do? Nelson turns things around, and he helps Homegirl with Nucky's prosecution by providing her with all of the intel and all of the info that he had gained on Nucky back in season 1. If you all will remember, the first half of season 1, the majority of season 1, Nelson was trying to build up a case against Nucky, and then of course, as he said in this week's episode, his supervisor told him, look man, just take care of the booze, leave Nucky Thompson alone. So now it feels as if Nelson's throwing his hat back into the ring, because now he's teaming up with Homegirl. So, boom. That's what Nelson was up to this week. First character out the way. That's going to segue into what was going on with Nucky. Nucky didn't do much in this week's episode. He's pretty much just trying to, you can tell that Nucky is really trying to keep everything under control. Because, this new assistant attorney, he didn't plan for this shit. Nobody planned for this shit. So he's just trying to roll with it the best he can. I'm trying to think, because of course towards the end of the episode we got the big what the fuck that happened to Nucky, which I'm going to save that for the next character I'm going to talk about, which is going to be Jimmy. But before I do that, I want to make sure that as far as what Nucky was up to this week, we got our grounds covered with that. Because like I said, Nucky didn't really do much this week. Not much. Not outside of, the Nelson thing. And then the thing that happened with Jimmy, those were the two biggest things that happened to Nucky this week. So, yeah. Yeah, I think that pretty much does it. If anything else comes to mind, I'll mention it. But let's segue from Nucky and let's move on to Jimmy. Now, what Jimmy didn't do too much this week either. But there was significance in it, because Jimmy finally had a sit down with pretty much all of his aficionados. Luciano and his associate from New York were there. Capone came back in town. Richard was present. And then Eli made his appearance known. And this is the first, and keep in mind, this is the first time we've seen Eli since 2 weeks ago when he killed Alderman Fatso. So pretty much what happened was, they were pretty much meeting up to get on the same page with exactly what their plan was as far as Nucky's whole operation. Everybody around the entire table, they suggested, hey man, just whack Nucky. Just whack him. Of course, we know Jimmy didn't want to do that. Why? Because Jimmy, this whole Nucky-Jimmy fight, as far as Jimmy's concerned, he is trying to outsmart Nucky before Nucky goes to prison. See that's the thing about this whole little struggle between him and Nucky, because Jimmy is under the assumption that Nucky will go to prison. He knows that at the end of the day, Nucky's going to prison, or at least that's what he believes in. So he's trying to make the arrangements. He's trying to make the political connections. He's trying to do the whole political power play to, in essence, take Atlantic City from Nucky just in the nick of time for Nucky to go to prison. Which is noble. It is, let's be real. That's a rather noble thing to do, to challenge Nucky on his terms, in his game, to play Nucky's game. You follow? Any thug, any any fucking riffraff can whack somebody, okay? But it does take an individual with character to be able to play the game, to be able to play the other person's game, to be able to play a chess match, if you will, with their prey, with their opponent, because by doing so, you put them on even playing field. You see what I'm saying? For him to just whack Nucky, I mean, you whack people that you don't give a shit about, but for him to actually engage in this thing with Nucky, he's solidifying that Nucky is a worthy opponent, that he is worth the game that he's playing. You follow? It's a respectful thing to do in a way. It is betrayal, it is treason, it is mutiny, but it's not an ugly way of going about it. So, of course, like I said, Jimmy, he didn't want to do that. And everyone was in on it. Fucking Capone was in on it. Luciano was in on it. Eli suggested it. Fucking Jimmy's mom was going ahead with it. Jimmy said, call a dude in from out of town, let him do it. And then that's going to bring me back into what I was talking about with Nucky. What's Nucky's, Nucky's big event in this week's fucking episode. Jimmy goes and meets up with Nucky at this, big public affair that they got going on, and he pretty much gives Nucky like this final little message, just in time for the killer to go ahead and try to fucking pop Nucky in the face. Now, this was so full of fail. And the reason for that being is this. Jimmy should have never said anything to Nucky. He should have never even let his presence be known. Why? Because the second Jimmy went up to Nucky and said that shit, he put Nucky on alert. It's just like a bull, okay? For any of you all, it's kind of funny that I'm using this analogy, but for any of you all who've seen Wild Hogs, the Disney film with John Travolta, Martin Lawrence, Tim Allen, and William H. Macy, the scene when they're playing Slap the Bull, where they're slapping the bull on the ass and then running away before the bull has a chance to fucking gore them. They like Tim Allen, he was able to, slap the bull on the ass and, got away scot-free or whatever. Well, no, that was John Travolta who did that. And then they were like, oh, yeah, go ahead, slap the bull. It's like, it'll be really fun to see how the bull reacts now that he's alert. And they were like, alert? Why? Because the bull wasn't paying attention the first time. So yeah, you could go ahead, you could sneak behind the bull, you could slap him on his ass. He won't do shit to you. But the second he's alert, then he's a fucking threat. The reason why I brought that whole fucking thing up in this review is because that's exactly what happened with that scene between Jimmy and Nucky. If Jimmy had never said anything to Nucky, if he had never even let his presence known, first off, if the killer was smart enough to shoot him in the back of the fucking head, Nucky would have been dead as a fucking doornail. The second that Jimmy went and approached him and said that shit, he put Nucky on high alert. So by the time the shooter came out, Nucky put his hand out to block his face, to distract the shooter, to kind of throw off his aim. And it worked because, yeah, he popped the shit out of Nucky straight through the fucking hand. But Nucky's still alive. So, in order to wrap up this review, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to talk about the last person on my list, and that's Margret, good old Mrs. Schroeder. Because in this week's episode, Margret takes a trip to Brooklyn, and she reunites with her family. I believe it was her big brother, I want to say his wife, and her two little sisters. I believe that's who it was. And we did learn a lot about Margret. We learned a lot about her past in this week's episode. We found out why she left Ireland. Apparently she had she too, like Nelson, had a child out of wedlock. And of course, that's a big no-no in Catholic Ireland. So she had to flee the country. From the way they spoke about it, it was almost as if she was cast out in a way. Because she accused her brother of not sticking up for her. So like I said, by that definition, it sounds as if she was cast out, like she was shunned, like she was disowned, which is what I'm thinking. You know, before I was under the impression that she left on her own free will, but now it kind of seems more as if she was cast out, disowned, you know. And then of course we found out it's like, yeah, she had this you know, this relationship with this guy, you know, one night of lust or whatever, and apparently she had a miscarriage on the way over to America. And then, you know, we see her trying to reach out to, you know, her younger sister. We see her reaching out to her younger sister who she's never met before and stuff like that. And then the shocker at the end of this episode. Okay, you remember in last week's episode how Margret made the confession that she was actually having lust for another man who turned out to be Owen Slater? Well, yeah, it went down in this week's episode. Yeah, she jumped Owen's bones. And I have to tell you, that is a very distasteful quality about her character. Because, not honestly, I'll be real with you all. I'm gonna level with you all. I'm not gonna fuck around here and lie to y'all. I've never liked Margret as a character. I was actually hoping that she was going to get killed in the last season. If you all remember the episode when Nucky, in season 1, when Nucky and Eli had that conversation, and Eli told Nucky that Margret was a liability that he created. It was right after Nucky had that argument, that fight with Margret. You know, when she slapped him and he took the bottle of whatchamacallit that she uses and threw it and broke the fucking mirror. You all remember that episode. It was a pretty heated episode in season 1. After that episode, I was kind of hoping that Nucky was going to kill her, but apparently he didn't. And so, you know, the fact that she's kind of sticking around has been somewhat of a thorn in my side, but she hasn't caused wind and waves yet. Like, she hasn't severely fucked things up yet. So I've given her a pass. And then, you know, she's got her own little story arc in this season that has absolutely nothing to do with Nucky. So I kind of dug that about her. But in learning all this shit about her, I mean, honestly, call me what you will, but Margaret's a slut. She is. Because apparently she had this thing with this guy and she had a kid with him, and then there was a miscarriage, so she left her fucking homeland in shame, and then she came over to America and she found this new fucking prick and had 2 kids with him. But then when she had another miscarriage because he beat her and then he wound up getting killed, she didn't seem to really care. Why? Because all she was doing from episode fucking 1, she was just infatuated with fucking Nucky. So then she goes ahead and she kicks it with Nucky, and she's doing all that shit with him. And now in season 2, when Nucky needs her the most and all that type of bullshit, she ups and fucking jumps the bones of this other cat who's one of Nucky's fucking buttons. I'm sorry, but that's the behavior of a slut. If you don't like that term, we have a more biblical term for it. It's called a harlot. Okay? Say what you will. The woman is no fucking good. And I just love how her little ass was all high and mighty in last season. And she carries herself up as if her shit don't stink. But she's actually pretty fucking worse off than most of the other goddamn characters. Not to mention, she's stealing from Nucky. Should I throw that into the fucking ring in this week's, should I remind you all of that shit that we saw a couple of weeks back? She's stealing from Nucky, and she's lying to him. I just got worked up there for a minute, because, yeah, she really does piss me off. I do not like that fucking character, and I'm praying she gets killed soon and swiftly. That's one character I wouldn't mind seeing snuffed. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wrap this video up, man. Fucking Margret Schroeder, bitch. Anywho, So yeah, so that's gonna do it for me this week. Thank you all for joining and for bearing with me through that little rant. But anyway, yeah, this is Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, signing off, and until next time, peace.